Wow, I already drank that whole shake? This is Madeira Citrine from Uruguay. These three pieces are all internally clean and have no color zoning. They're flawless. So I'll just pick the biggest one of this lot, and that'll be the stone that I cut. This piece of Madeira Citrine rough weighs in at 8.51 carats. So that should be able to cut a final gemstone in the neighborhood of 2.5, 3 carats. Let's see. BOPIE'S already selected the design that she wants me to cut this gemstone into. I cut Aria Akvan's Temple Runes design a little while ago, and that's the design BOPIE wants to see, this time in a different type of gem material, so thus citrine. Aria put this design into the Gemology Project website for any cutter to try. So here's the website where you can get the Temple Runes design. And when I cut this design, this is how it should look. For my citrine, since the design is around, I'm going to use the keyed dot feature of the Ultratech and put it into the spindle with that feature in mind. It's not really necessary. You can override the feature, but when you put it in with the key dot, it only goes in like that. One way it sets. And what that does is when I transfer it and use the other dot and use my transfer fixture, it sets up the stone so that the girdle's aligned, and that when I align the upper half of the stone, it should be already aligned, but I can check it anyway. But you don't have to use this feature. You can override it simply by twisting, right? It pulls the dop up a little bit, but you can set the dop any way you want. But for a round, I would use the key dop feature. Just set it in there, tighten the set screw, and then we're ready to start cutting on our citrine. For my citrine, the first line of instructions is to cut at the 42.3 angle, starting at the index tooth of a 3 and going around every 6 teeth. So the first step is, of course, to set the index at 42.3 and then make sure your tooth is at the 3 and the one before that the 93. So either the 3 or the 93, and then cutting every 3 teeth, 3, the 9, the 15, and so on. And then I'm going to cut a center point with our citrine. Okay, so I start with my 3 tooth, and then the opposite of the 3, the 51 tooth, and then the next side, which is the 27, and the opposite of that, the 69. And when the 3 and the 51 hit a center point, I just check with the 27 and 75 to make sure that's also a center point. So now I've got the center point, and I can proceed with the rest of the indexes. So on the diagram, you can see the 3, and then the opposite side of that is the one below it, the 51, because there's 8 facets, 8 teeth, the 3, the 9, the 15, 21, and so on, to get you to the 51 tooth. And so that's the opposite of the 3, or you could look on the dial and see from the 3 tooth what the opposite would be. Let me see if I can show you that real quick. So the 3 tooth is there, so the opposite is the 51. So if you get those two, go from the 3 to the 51, and you get to the center point, that's where you know you'll be at the center point all the way around. So now, as I continue to preform our citrine, I'm ready to cut the girdle and establish the width of our stone. I'll use the same index teeth that I used in the P1 set of instruction to cut the girdle. So wherever you see these facets, there'll be a girdle facet from there to there and from there to there. So I cut the girdle at 90 degrees, and rather than starting, you can start where the index says at the number 3 tooth or not, But what I tend to do is I look for where I'm going to have to cut in the furthest. So if you look at think of this as a circle to get our round stone. This facet right here is the furthest in, closest to the culet or the center point. This facet right here is the one I'm going to have to cut at least that far in. So there's no point in starting here and cutting a little bit and checking and cutting a little bit more and checking and cutting a little bit more and checking. I know I'm going to have to go into here. So what I look for is this facet right here. That's the 93 and that's the 3. So I think I'll start, in this case actually I will start with the number 3 facet, or the 93. Let me start the 93. I think that's the actual one right here. So I'll start with the 93 and I'll cut in to there. So I know I have to cut that far in. And all this other rough is waste. It's going to be cut out. And this is as big as I could make a round stone. So I set my angle at 90 degrees and I'll start cutting my girdle. So if I lower the mast anymore, you see the index, our angle starts jumping. That means my stone is touching the lap. You can also, I also move the stone back and forth as I lower the mast. And when you hear the grinding, you know you're touching the mast. The stone is touching the lap. So I also changed the direction of my lap to go counterclockwise. That's so that the water that is thrown off goes away from me. I have a pretty okay drip. I'm using a 340 grit topper, so I want a lot of water to wash the slurry away. That's a good drip for me. I do put a cut piece of a sponge in so that it helps so that reduce the splash of water. And now I probably will use about a 600 RPM. And I cut down a little bit until I get to a girdle on that matches my index tooth on the P1. So I have a little bit more to cut. You can see where I've ground and that you can see the center is kind of still not touched. So I need to go in just a little bit further, but I can do that with my next lap. So this is where I need my lap to go. I'll probably bring it in a little bit more, but I know the other facets are further out, so everything else will grind a little bit. So this is where I'll start with my mast in the right, down at the right level, touching the lap, and that's where I'll start cutting, and I'll cut all the way around. Okay, so that gone all the way around the stone and turned it into a round, and that is as big as the stone could be for this design. Now take my calipers, do a quick measurement to see how big we're talking about. It looks like, I reckon it's a little bit over 9, but let's see what the calipers say. So using the calipers, it's about 9.5 millimeters, so I may not worry about the size and just cut it and polish it and see what size it is, or I may, since I've got a few more laps to use, I'll probably end up bringing this down to see how close to a 9 millimeter stone I can get, That way BOPIE has the option of either designing a mounting, or she can use a standard mounting, because at 9mm it'll be kind of a calibrated size. So I did the 340 grit topper. Now I'll use a 600 grit topper. I won't do the third line of instruction yet. I'll wait till I get a finer lap, because those facets will cut very quickly. So I'll go back and cut the first line of instruction, the P1, with a 600 grit topper. Okay, our Madeira Citrine is pre-polished now with 8,000 grit diamond on my zinc lap. So now I'll polish it with the creamway and cerium oxide. So I'll start with the first tier, the P1, at an angle of 42.3 degrees, and see how quickly I can polish. I think just a few swipes because I did a pre-polish, but let's take a look. Okay, and that's polished up, that facet. Let me bring it in and show you. Okay, the P1 row is right here, this triangle looking facet, and let me rotate it around, you'll be able to see. This is the one that's been polished. The others have not. So what you're seeing is an 8,000 grit diamond pre-polish, pretty good pre-polish, and it allows you to get a really good polish with just a few swipes of the cerium oxide. So I'll continue to polish this row. Okay, I finished polishing the bottom half of our citrine. So now I will transfer it in with a transfer dops, and we'll cut the upper half or the crown of our citrine. Okay, I've marked the space on the girdle where the pavilion, the P2 line of instruction, comes up and makes a little point just touching the girdle, and there's four spaces at the 96, the 24, the 48, and the 72. So I marked them all with my Sharpie just to make sure that when I transfer my stone and put the stone in the Ultratech to cut the upper half, that I'm in alignment, because the bottom part, the P2, where the facet touches the girdle on the top part, that has to align with the C3 instructions where the point also touches. Now, fortunately, because the Ultratech has a key dop, so because of the key dop feature, when you put your dop into your spindle and all the way down, see how it turns? It fits right there. That would be in perfect alignment with the dop that you cut the pavilion with. So that key dop feature allows you to do transfers like this, and that will put the 96 right where it should be, and there you can see the little Sharpie mark is right on alignment where it should be. So that's the advantage of the key dop feature. I'm still going to set up a flat stone on my flat piece of metal on my flattest lap and make sure that my girdle facets are aligned properly. But we're all set up, and I won't be miscutting the crown. And of course, the other way that I check to make sure I'm in alignment is I set my index to any of the facets for the girdle, in this case the 51, and that's just so that at the 51 degree, or the 51 tooth, the set screw is at the top, so when I get things in alignment, it's easier for me to reach my Allen wrench into the top and set by set screw and lock in the dop into the spindle. But what you're doing is you're just raising ever so slightly your stone, raising the mast at the 90-degree angle, and you want to break the plane on that calibrated stone all across the facet at the same time. So if your facet was out of alignment, it would be like that, right? You can see that you're not breaking the plane correctly. And if you were to set your stone and start cutting your crown with the stone set in this way, your girdle wouldn't be in alignment, your crown would not match the pavilion, so you'd be out of alignment. So the key dot feature actually puts you in alignment, but again, you can override the key dot feature pretty easily by just pulling the stone out a little bit, and you can set it anywhere you want it. So once I have the stone aligned, I simply tighten up the set screw and we're ready to cut the upper half of our citrine. Okay, I finished polishing the upper half of our citrine, so now I'm going to cut the table. So I'll set the stone up to cut the table in our Ultratech. So the table polished right up with cerium oxide. I started with my 600 grit topper lap, then went to my 12M and 8000 grit diamond on zinc lap, and then just polished it right up with cerium oxide on my cream white. So we'll take the stone, soak it in acetone, weigh it, measure it, and send it off to BOPIE. Today I cut a beautiful Uruguay citrine using Arya's Temple Ruins design, and the final gemstone looks super. Temple Ruins is not a difficult design to cut. However, you need to ensure that when you align the upper half or crown of the gemstone into the spindle of your faceting machine, that you have proper alignment, as the top and bottom halves have to match, and because of the points on both halves. So I would not recommend this design for a brand new cutter, but after you've cut a few stones, do give it a try. And please let me know in the comments what you think of this citrine and the design. And as always, happy fasting, everyone.